Hi, this is Chris Radford from Henry's Avalanche Talk. We've just launched the Hangout, and but we're going to hang on just 2 or 3 minutes before we get going properly. Just waiting for people to get the chance to connect up and start viewing. So we'll be with you shortly. Hi there, just as people are coming online, this is Chris from Henry's Avalanche Talk. Just to let you know that we'll be starting shortly. We're just giving it a couple of minutes to let people connect up. So don't worry, we'll be there shortly. So just for those of you who are joining us now, this is Chris from Henry's Avalanche Talk. Just to let you know, we're just letting it run for it. We've started the broadcast, but we're actually not going to start the discussion just for another minute or so, just to let people connect up and make sure that everybody's ready before we actually get going with the formal discussion. So we'll be ready to go any minute now. Okay, so I think we'll get underway right now. This is Chris Radford from Henry's Avalanche Talk.
Hi, this is Henry from Henry's Avalanche Talk. Good evening to everybody, and thanks for joining us.
So thanks, Henry. And Henry will be going through much of the discussion as we go through this subject today. What I wanted to do just at the beginning was a short technical introduction. If you're watching on the Google Plus page, you should see or I think maybe on the YouTube as well, but certainly if you're on the Google Plus page, you will see a Q&A button on the right-hand side. And if you press that, I think it launches another window, but certainly that Q&A button gives you access to a facility where you can type in questions, which we'll see. And as those questions come in, we'll pick them up. And and I'll pass them on to Henry, and Henry will answer them as best we can. So, so as I say, there's a button on the top right that says Q&A, and there that gives you the opportunity to type in a question and pass it through to us, and then we can pick that up at various points as we go through the discussion. So. And the other thing about this discussion is what we're planning to do is it kind of breaks down into 3 sections. We're going to have a look at the current conditions, and Henry's going to tell us what's been happening out there. Then we're going to have a look at how avalanche bulletins are prepared and what they mean. And then we're going to have a look, the third section is we'll take a look at the Meteo France bulletin and forecast for tomorrow, and we'll get Henry to tell us what he thinks is telling us that we should expect. So is that all good with you, Henry?
Yep, sounds perfect.
And So, and everybody should now have a screen up that says Avalanche Bulletin, and what you see on the right-hand side of the screen is as it says at the top, is the bulletin for Saturday, the 3rd of January, and the forecast then. So we're going to have a look at that a bit later. But before we do that, we'll have a look backwards a little bit, and maybe Henry, we've got a few pictures here. Maybe you can talk us through a little bit about what you've found in the last few days and what you've noticed.
Sure. Well, I'll start out by saying this is one of the more difficult end of December's, early January's that I've experienced in the 20 seasons or so, 20 years that I've been skiing out here. And just for those of you who've joined us, this is pretty much focused on the northern French Alps, and more specifically the Espace-Quilly area, which is Val d'Isère and Tignes, because that's where I live, and that's therefore the best place I can comment on. So we started, as everyone probably knows, with not a lot of snow, although we were lucky enough in places like this, where this photo was taken in the Fournet of Val d'Isère, to have a little bit more snow than most of the rest of France, up until about a week ago when we got the snowstorm, or when most of the Alps got the snowstorm. I'll just say, when I went out on Sunday, after we got 40-50 centimeters of snow, and it was pretty cold out. Actually, it was very cold. I was expecting some really, really very nice powder conditions despite the wind, but I was very wrong. Last Sunday, I got out and tried to make a few turns, and we ended up actually, I was skiing with some quite good skiers, and after a couple attempts, we just went back out onto the piste, really. And that's really very, very rare for me to do, especially the first day after 40-50 centimeters. But not only was it very hard to ski because it was so heavy, it was also very unstable. There was a lot of medium to small, medium-sized avalanches, and I would say medium plus. There wasn't really any large avalanches, but there was quite a few small, medium, and medium large, I'll say, avalanches.
That's interesting, Henry, because it was an avalanche risk 4, wasn't it, or was that wrong?
Yes, well, I mean wrong. It's a forecast, and so just like a weather forecast sometimes forecasts rain, and it's partly sunny or even fully sunny, and vice versa. The avalanche bulletin it comes out the day before at about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, forecasting for the next day. So I wouldn't say that it was wrong. I think I was just slightly off. I don't think it should have really been a 4. I estimated it and determined it was more like a 3 on that day. But I can certainly understand how the forecasters would have put it up at a 4, because there could have been, and I could see how they could come to the conclusion and estimate that there could have been some really big avalanches that came down. I think the reason there wasn't any really big ones, at least in the area around where I live, in Savoie, in the Espace-Quilly area, and the high Tarentaise, is because there was so much wind that actually most of the snow got isolated into only leeward parts of the mountain and leeward parts of a slope, so it isolated the accumulations quite a bit. This is a photo from today, I think it's from today.
I know. Okay, yeah, it might be yesterday, I think.
Yeah, it might have been yesterday, from a colleague of mine. This looks more like yesterday, actually, of Wayne Watson from Alpine Experience, and it looks like good snow here. There is a few pockets here and there of good snow, but you really have to sniff it out and be with someone like Wayne, who's been here for about 30 seasons and has been able to sniff things out like this. A lot of it is you make about 5 or 6 turns in some nice snow, and then you hit some really bad crust that you ride on the top of, or you start breaking through on, and then get back into some snow that you sink into. I noticed even on the avalanche forecast they use the word powder, poudreuse in French. To me, there's not really any powder out there. It's heavy-ish. It's heavy to heavy-ish deep snow. down to about 30, 40 centimeters, maybe a bit more in places, and we'll get to that in a minute. It's I was hoping with the really cold temperatures that things would really kind of regenerate, as the French say, sort of break down and things get softer, which it did to a certain extent, but it's still highly variable. I think in some, we'll just leave it at that. It's very highly variable between the hard snow and the lightish snow that's not too deep, and then the deep snow that you kind of sink into, and it's kind of grabby and it feels a bit like quicksand. And I think this photo we have here sums it up pretty well too. You can see in some places, well, there's no snow at all from the wind, and then right next to that rocky bit next to the wind, that's really hard snow. And then as you move into areas that are protected from the wind, you get a whole mixture, a mixed bag of just about everything except for light powder.
So, but I notice there's a fair bit of wind stripping that you can see in this picture of the Ballon de la Sache.
Yeah.
And so this is another picture, Henry. I don't know what characterises. There's a few things in here that struck me. What do you notice in?
Well, it's hard snow. It's what we euphemistically refer to as skier's snow, and you got to be a really good skier to get in there and have the confidence to make turns in it, because otherwise you sort of just either float on or not float, but you're held on the top by the heavy layer on the top, or the thick layer on the top, or your skis come apart, and so it's pretty hard to ski unless you're really confident and you really know how to be fairly deliberate in your skiing. So that shows this here, and you can see it's really variable from the wind. There's some places where there's no snow at all, and then there's pockets where these people are skiing here. Another thing I'd point out, this is a great photo of people waiting at an island of safety where they're completely safe. At the top, those three people, there's no chance of any avalanche coming down on them. And then one by one, or at reasonable distances at this time right now is about 40 meters or so apart, they're only exposing one person at a time to any sort of danger, any possible danger. And that means that only one person going at a time means that there's only one person's weight at a time on the slope that's putting pressure on it, and so you're not taking any extra risk by putting two people in the same place, which could be enough to trigger an avalanche right now. I've been talking mainly about the quality of snow until right now. I'm just going to re-emphasize that actually it is very, very unstable. So even though I said that shouldn't have been a 4 the other day, in my opinion anyway, and that a 3 is pretty accurate, that rating is mainly based on the size of an avalanche that could be released. But just because it sounds like 3 out of 5 doesn't seem like all that high, it is still very sensitive and quite easy to trigger avalanches right now. You're going to see some photos in a minute of how many avalanches, actually slab avalanches, have been triggered either naturally or by people. So that's why these people are playing it extra safe on a slope that's probably just under 30 degrees. So the chances of it avalanching are very, very small. And if it is at 30 degrees in some places, it's definitely not much more. And so the chance of even triggering an avalanche is very small. But Wayne, like all of us at the moment, are practicing really, really conservative risk management policies. So this is a photo I was just referring to that I took a couple of days ago, and if you look along that road, there's lots of one I would say medium-sized avalanche over on the left-hand side, sort of the lower left-hand side of the screen, and then if you look all the way across, there's a couple, one on top of the other, of sort of smaller sizes. And if you move along that road, there's a whole bunch of them, and those are mostly set off by skiers, and one of them maybe by a piste machine. I forget which one. I was told by the ski patrol here, but most of those are set off by skiers, and which gives you an idea that even though they're not very big, the snowpack is very, very sensitive at the moment. There's a host of reasons for that. That I'm not going to really get into at the moment, but because I'm just reporting really on what's happening out there, and this is continuing at the moment. The very sensitive snowpack, and so we're being very, very careful and very cautious on where we go. Here's another photo I took from a few days ago, and right underneath the lift you can see a couple fractures right up high on by those sort of rocky cliffs, and then if you look sort of towards the center and over onto the top of the ridges on the left that look more in the distance, a little bit higher up there, you can see a couple more smaller releases, so that's kind of like pretty much what's happening. Very sensitive, lots of avalanches coming out, but the smallish-ish size is the reason for the danger rating level staying at 3 and not going up to 4. Chris is going to talk a little bit about that in a moment when we talk about the definitions of the different ratings, with some really good diagrams from Ortovox. But this is what's happening out there. And I think to summarize that this summary here comes from Wayne Watson's assessment. If you go onto the Alpine Experience website, you can do Alpine Experience off-piste and it'll come up. And you go into Wayne's diary. This is what he wrote today. It's quite interesting. He was talking about how fantastic the skiing was a couple weeks ago when we've had practically no snow, and that's because the snow did become fairly soft, even if it was a bit granular. It was really nice to ski in, as long as you made sure you got around the rocks. But as he pointed out, there was a layer underneath the snow we were skiing on that was kind of holding us up from sinking in a little bit onto the rocks. And remember, the snowpack is very, very thin right now, and that has kind of disappeared. It's kind of broken down due to the cold temperatures, and with this new snow, you're sinking into quite deep and into areas, well, down into the snow, and sometimes hitting rocks. And because you can't see them now, there's a lot of these things sort of lurking right underneath the snow, and because the snowpack is just kind of funny, it's sort of like quicksand. I've rarely ever seen it in anything like this, and it's really hard to kind of describe. But you'll be skiing along a bit, and then you sort of sink into it, and it pulls you down, and then you're sort of at the mercy of whatever is underneath on that slope. And at some place, I'm not sure if it was we pasted it in here, but Wayne, after he described, the hollowness of the snowpack and everything, and this goblets that he's talking about, it's a very sugary type of granular snow that turns it into sort of like quicksand. He says horribly fat skis would probably help as well, which I don't think I've ever really heard Wayne even be remotely positive about very wide skis. So if he's talking about fat skis probably working well, then you better believe that that's probably true, at least in his opinion. I like the way you got the horribly fat in there first, though.
And Henry, what are you expecting from the weather over the next? I gather there's a bit of a small change coming through.
Yeah, a small change. It's going to be very warm tomorrow, and by the end of the day, snow is going to start. And they've even actually are calculating it in millimeters, and at the Val d'Isère level, about 1,800, 2,000 meters. But they're saying 10 to 20 millimeters of snow, which means that up at about 2,300, 2,400 meters. That'll at least start out as proper snow. That could be 10 to 20, 25 centimeters where it does actually snow. And then it's supposed to continue. That's from Saturday into Sunday. And then later on in the week, I forget, I just have to check my weekly forecast here. I think it's more like Thursdays we're supposed to get maybe 10 centimeters of snow. There's a tiny chance that tonight we'll get 1 or 2 centimeters, but the main stuff is Saturday night to Sunday, and then later in the week on Thursday.
So that'll put a different spin on it. Although this underlying weakness that you're talking about, I guess, will still be there.
No, and that weakness will be there for a long, long time now. It never got the chance to get skier compacted. So I don't want to bring up a large sort of in-depth subject, but skier compaction on the classic off-piste runs is really, really important at the beginning of the season, and that's compaction of this weak layer that we all get almost always at the beginning of the season, to a greater or lesser extent. This year we have a significant weak layer, but because there was so little snow, there has not been enough snow so that people could ski it, and so that it has not been subject to people skiing, hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of people packing down that weak layer. So that weak layer is all that more significant, even on the well-traveled off-piste runs and easy access. So yeah, one thing I want to point out, and people should walk away from this webinar understanding, is that in the northern French Alps and also throughout the entire Alps, where there was snow before these last snowfalls especially, it's going to be very, 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 very unstable, or continue to be that way.
That's great, Henry, thank you. Just as a small technical interruption now, for those of you who've joined, if you're watching the webinar on the Hangout on the Google Plus page or even on the YouTube, you should see a Q&A button, and if you click on that, the webinar will pop out into a new window, and you'll get the opportunity to type in any questions you've got and pass them through to us, and then we can see those questions and get Henry to answer them. So at any time, please feel free to do that, and I'll pick up the questions as we go through.
And feel free to make comments as well. If anyone's out here in resort, or I don't know, in Austria or Switzerland or Italy or something like that, other areas in the Alps, feel free to make a comment, and
or even disagree with you. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very good point, Henry. Yeah, that would be great. And the next thing I wanted to move on to was I looked very quickly at the Canadian Avalanche Bulletin, because I found, as someone coming into off-piste and then trained pretty extensively by Henry, but I found that the French Bulletin quite hard to pick out the critical information, and
Me too.
and when this bulletin was shown to me by a gentleman called Carl Klassen from the Canadian Avalanche Association and their forecasting service, it helped me get clarity about what I should be looking for from the bulletin. So I want to show this briefly, which has nothing to do with the current conditions. It's just an example, and then we're going to have a look at some implications, and then look at the Meteo France bulletin and get Henry's comment on that and what we should take out of that for the future. So the first thing is that it very simply gives you the avalanche forecast danger rating and it usually gives it at more than one altitude. The French one gives 2 altitudes, this Canadian one gives 3 different altitudes, which is probably a function of the kind of terrain that they have. And the significance of that number is considerable, and there's an awful lot that can be read into that. I'm going to have a look at that in a minute. But it also, this diagram here made it clearer what other information we're looking to get from this, which is which slope aspects have the greatest risk. I emphasize greatest as opposed to which do and don't. How likely an avalanche is, and this is in the French bulletin, it's just that it's hidden in the text and you have to sift it out.
And it's also, just if I could interject, it's also what I was getting at about how likely right at the moment. It's very, very likely at the moment. So right. That's what I was getting at in my discussion.
And then, which is partly about the risk factor, but the danger rating, but how big you can expect an avalanche, because that affects your judgment about what kind of terrain you can go on and what size of area you have to worry about.
Yeah, and the distances that you take between people. Do you ski a slope one at a time? Do you ski with distances of 10 or 20 meters, which certainly if there's only small avalanches, around 10, 20 meter distances is perfectly reasonable. But if there's large to very large avalanches, that would be that'd be really very dangerous.
And then the last thing is all bulletins have some sort of unique descriptive pointers that are relevant to the current conditions, and we just need to pick that. Those are not part of a system; they're just observations that we need to pay attention to, and they give you some guidance about what to look out for and what to avoid. So I don't know about everybody out there, but I found that kind of helpful as to know what to look for, and one of the reasons it is, and it's also helpful to understand the significance of the danger levels, because text in the bulletin is related to the danger level. And if we just do a quick resume using some material recently published by Autovox to illustrate that at level 1, not the current conditions, although it was 1 below 2,200 meters. At level 1, the danger exists in a very few spots and in very small areas, as highlighted by the green on this diagram. And typically, as well, avalanches can only be triggered by by a large load, which is more than one person, when it's a danger level 1. So it's not no danger; it's in very few places and needs quite a lot of pressure. The implication for that is that when you're skiing this track down this slope, you only need to worry about what's underneath your feet, and you don't need to worry about what's either side of you. You just need to worry that you don't put yourself in one of those spots, so this track would be okay. As the danger level increases to a 2, the size of those danger areas and the number of those areas, the size increases and the number increases, but it's still quite a small minority of the pack. And here you're in a situation where large loads are very likely to trigger avalanches, but small loads might, and so you've moved off a level. Is that about right, Henry? I think it's
I think this is a fantastic overview of the danger rating levels. I haven't seen anything that's as good as this. I usually have a pretty big critical judgment, negative critical judgment of definitions. Yeah. But I think that this is really fantastic. So keep going. I like this.
There's some text here which is in detail, and if those of you who've got a copy of the Autovox Safety Academy, it's in there, and this material will be coming into our talks and material. This is the first time we've published it in this form on this webinar. So the thing I took out of this again was the size of those yellow dangerous spots, and then this diagram here gives this very simple idea of now, if we're coming down that slope, we need to worry about an area slightly wider either side of us, simply because the areas in which danger exists are slightly larger. So we need to be that bit more attuned to steep slopes and to maintaining distances between people when we're on a slope greater than 30 degrees.
Yeah, so I think what's really important for people to walk away with here is that it's when you get down to like a danger rating of 1 or 2, it doesn't mean that you couldn't trigger an avalanche or even one person. More likely with a group, but even one person could trigger an avalanche, but you start to see it in the sense that you could actually trigger something much smaller. But if you're over a cliff or a little hole or something, it could have just as drastic consequences as a bigger avalanche could, if you're not paying attention. And people do get caught out. Most accidents, most people who get killed on a danger rating of 2 and 3. And that is mainly because they're not looking after simple things like their last sentence in this danger rating definition. The surrounding hazard zone for level 2 has a radius of 20 meters around the track, as Chris pointed out. So what does that mean? That means that you keep 20-25 meter distances to be really sure that only one person at a time is exposed to any sort of danger.
And then as we come up to 3, again, there are more of the more spots, where there's a potential danger and they're larger in area, and the resultant avalanches that might occur would be larger. And here you're definitely in the case of just one small additional load on a steep slope is sufficient to trigger a slope if that slope is vulnerable. There may be some medium and big natural avalanches in isolated cases related to the spots that have the greatest danger, as highlighted in the bulletin, or the steepest and most loaded slopes within the avalanche danger zone of 30 to 45 degrees. And they're being quite specific about avoiding slopes greater than 40 degrees.
And 40 degrees, for those of you who are having trouble picturing that, is steeper than any black run.
Yeah.
And that you'll be on. You're getting into sort of extreme skiing sort of steepnesses. Perhaps there's one black run somewhere, or two in the Alps that will have consistent 40-degree slopes, but not many at all. 30 degrees is already very steep. It's the steepness of sort of an average black run, or a very, very steep part of a red run.
So what we have in a danger 3 is you have to be concerned about a pretty wide area either side of you, and they haven't put a specific distance on that, but needless to say, it's bigger than the 20 meters that was mentioned in a 2.
Yeah.
And you're looking at, to use your metaphor, Henry, I guess, or your advice, Henry, you're talking about distances of 50 or 100 meters between skiers.
Probably, yeah. If I found that there was very little recent avalanche activity around, and if of those avalanches they were quite small, then I wouldn't probably spread out at 100 meters or so, unless there was a really exposed area like a cliff or a big hole below, which I couldn't avoid, because I would, in these conditions, I would avoid obvious terrain traps. One of my critiques a lot of time with definitions of the danger ratings is that, 3, it looks or it sounds as if it's too dangerous to go anywhere, and I kind of get this feeling from this image right here, because and so I'd like to, I think if I've understood it correctly, this is what you should really just be watching out for. Your eyes should be scanning, and you should be aware of
the danger is the size of the danger is on this image here.
Yes, this makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
For this danger rating.
Dangers exist in these areas marked orange.
Yes.
And what this diagram is saying to me is the consequence of that is you need to be thinking. There is not a danger.
Yes.
In this area of orange. There is. You need to be thinking about, as you follow that black line as a skier, you need to be in your mind thinking that it's okay either side of me by this much.
Mm-hmm.
So really, in my mind, it's just like a wider area that I need to be worried about.
Yeah, or thinking, I like that term, evaluation radius, so maybe they should really underline that, because I think the thing is, you take a look at that and you're like, oh, I can't go anywhere, but this is the evaluation radius, and you explained it very well, Chris, so I think we can probably move along unless anyone has a question.
And now, when it's a 4, by now we're getting to a majority of the snowpack is vulnerable to a release. Avalanches potentially very large, and a low additional load, any one person is sufficient. The advice here is not what some people say, which is don't go off-piste in a 4. It's avoid slopes over 30 degrees. Is that consistent with your strategy in this?
Yes, I think on a real avalanche danger of 4, then you really want to stay away from any slopes below you or above you, and especially they even emphasize it here. Bear in mind the possibility of naturally triggered avalanche from catchment areas above, but also a distance trigger. So you want to just stay in areas that are not exposed to steep slopes. And on a real 4, and what I mean by real 4 is that I find that especially in France, there will be a forecast of a 4, and it really isn't a 4. So those of you who've had some great days on a 4 and you've seen that nothing has actually avalanched, again, I'll get back to the forecasting. The forecasters might have thought that it was a 4, and actually it wasn't.
So, and a real 4, you're saying, Henry, that it's this distance triggering, which is another one of the big things. Which you mean, I understand you to mean by that I'm not standing on a slope that's 30 degrees or more. I'm standing on a slope that's 20 degrees or less.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's a 30-degree slope above me somewhere that might trigger.
Exactly, and that's why it's good to be aware of, like what Wayne wrote on his diary, that there was lots of whoomping going along when he's on flat slopes and low angle slopes, and the whoomping is the weak layer collapsing, and of course right now at a danger rating of 3, and then it's less likely to trigger slopes above, but when and if we get a significant amount of snow, then that weak layer is still going to be there because we know it's there, and we've heard reports on it, and that means that that a distance trigger will be that much more likely with a lot more snow. And I don't know if I just explained that well or not, but
and here this diagram of this skier's line through this snow says that you pretty much need to be confident about the whole of that slope before you went anywhere near it.
Yeah.
So
especially touring, I think touring possibilities are greatly restricted at avalanche danger level 4. To me, that says just never, when you're touring, like touring going up, walking with skins on, where you don't have the ability to be able to just turn around and ski out of danger's way. You're a lot less mobile. It means you really should be not going anywhere near 30-degree slopes at all, not even close.
And at this level, danger level, which we very rarely see, I think that image really says it's kind of out of bounds, doesn't it?
Yeah. I like the wording though in this. That ski touring is not recommended. I mean, it's the first time in a 5 I haven't seen like people say, that you should everything, but you should be shot if you're going out on the mountain in these conditions. And so I like the wording on this, because it should be up to us if we decide whether or not to go touring or where we want to go, because the amounts of risks that we take should be an individual decision, and also if you want to go out on a danger rating 5, you should have the right to do it. But usually the whole mountain is closed because there's windy and snowy. But certainly it might be good in areas and safe in areas where there's absolutely no slopes of 30 degrees anywhere, even an imaginable site.
So the purpose of that exercise was really to take a quick look at the meaning behind each of the danger levels and what supplementary information we should be looking for in the text. Because in my experience, once I understood those definitions more precisely, I found it a lot easier to read the text and to see what the experts were trying to point out to us in the bulletin. So if we look to this opening page for the bulletin for the Savoie area, and then zoom in on Haute-Tarentaise, and maybe Henry, I should hand over to you now to take us through to sort of highlight each of the boxes and what they're kind of telling us here.
Okay, can you just go back and circle the Haute-Tarentaise part of the map there for Savoie or Savoie? Yeah, so it's right around the Bourg Saint-Maurice area and up, and that's where Tignes and Val d'Isère, Les Arcs, La Plagne, and perhaps not the Three Valleys. That would be in.
No, that's right. Yeah.
That would be in the Vanoise section. Yeah. So we're going to go into Haute-Tarentaise, as you said, and those black bits are representing the areas where the biggest danger is. And as I was looking through this before with Chris, I jumped onto something right away because I'm here and I have my way of interpreting these bulletins. And I'll just say that what I jump on right away was that where there was recent accidents. I'm not sure if it shows up here. Oh yes, yeah, it's the second to last sentence that in French, even if you have broken French, you can sort of figure it out. Northwest pente is slopes, dangereuse is danger, and then in brackets it says accidents recent, récent. That's one of the first things that comes out to me. But I think maybe what I'll do is because this basically summarizes what's going on out there, what I've just been going on about, all of the different layers of snow, the weak layer underneath the newer snow, but maybe I'll hand it back to Chris to interpret this in the way in which he has found is methodical and makes sense to him.
Yeah. So, well, a bit like the Canadian one, we have at the top the first of all the altitude to be concerned about.
Yes, that was the first one.
As of tomorrow, it's be worried above 2,200 meters, which, given current conditions, is probably everywhere that we might want to go. The
Canadians call that elevation, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then it's telling us to be more concerned about north to northwest, north through to west, and south to southeast. That it's an interesting double. I don't often see that where they've kind of got two different areas like that. That's quite unusual.
Yeah, I think it's because we had some really strong north winds over the last few days.
Yeah,
I believe. But again, they talked about they made it. I mean, if I was doing this, I'd almost like put an exclamation point on the northwest slopes, because they even said the northwest ones seem to be the most dangerous because of recent accidents.
And then the biggest thing to worry about, and this is a pretty big thing to worry about, is that there are hidden wind slabs underneath the powder. Where those pockets of powder exist, they're often sitting on wind slabs, which of course is why, Henry, you're saying stay off stuff that's greater than 30 degrees.
Yeah, and they say in this forecast that it's really spread out. It's not really clear. Yeah, there's just lots and lots of little pockets. Well, exactly what you said. You just don't know where the weak layers are. So we're just being very, very, very careful, because the best skiing tends to be on the north side of the mountain. And we're not. Just because it says this is where the most danger is doesn't mean that you shouldn't go there. It's just you go there with more knowledge and hopefully a little bit more caution and a plan in mind. And I think if we break it down into what we were looking at with the Canadian the Canadian mainly 4 points, there was elevation, and then I think what was it slope? Yeah.
There was the slope aspects, how likely it is and how big it is. And I often find references, they're not talking so much about likelihood and size here, because the issue here is that there are slabs everywhere, particularly northwest and southeast, but there are slabs everywhere. Yeah. And where there's a pocket of snow and it's more than 30 degrees, it's pretty much everywhere that you need to be concerned about it at the moment from this information. And this word, the word heterogene occurs twice in here, which is to do with the unpredictability and variety of conditions, I think. And,
heterogeneous is I mean, they're using kind of big scientific words, but that means like really variable, and it's the opposite of homogeneous, and homogeneous is just a fancy word for being the same. So it's the opposite of the same. It's really, really a huge amount of variety, but I would like to just emphasize what the Canadian categories. Very easy to trigger, but quite small avalanches, small to medium, with some exceptions. And I think one exception of a fairly big one that was triggered on Monday or Tuesday, I believe it was a photo by Andreas Bjorklund, and that is on the Henry's Avalanche Talk blog.
Yeah.
that for this these next few days, and that went up a few hundred meters. Started kind of small at the top and got bigger. That's pretty much the bigger sizes that I've seen around at the moment.
And Thierry Arnoux is pointing out that that risk still exists, as he talks about the Pont Northwest are more dangerous due to, and there's evidence of recent accidents. So it's what I found, for those of you who aren't mountain professionals, I found that this takes a lot of work to read, but you can kind of, if you take the time and pick it out, you're a lot more confident when you go out and look. And then I always go out and look and see if I get confirmatory evidence of what's being described. And if I do frequently see that where there are slabs released, accidental avalanches, or on the slopes, that they correspond. It almost always, I find, corresponds with those black segments identified in this Meteo France bulletin.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Chris. Just and for everybody, go out with a critical mind. Don't take all of this as the gospel, so to speak. Go out there and look at the mountain with your own critical mind and see if it corresponds. Because for me, like for example, when I saw the danger rating of 4, I was like, okay. I mean, it's a forecast, so I give them the benefit of the doubt, and the guys do the best job they can. But as I was skiing around on that day, I was like, yeah, it is really unstable. I'm being very careful. But the avalanches just weren't the size that would warrant a 4. And I think that's one of the reasons why it came down to a 3 quite quickly.
And then at the bottom of the page on the French Bulletin, you get this picture of snow depths worth paying attention to in terms of where it might actually be viable to ski.
Yeah.
And a description of the quality you might find, and that these descriptions I tend to find will cover altitude and aspect and locations. So well worth having a look for, because you get some pointers, not so much on safety, but on where you might find some decent snow.
Definitely, and because that's the name of the game, isn't it? I mean, that's what we're all after, is finding good snow, and where there is actually snow is is definitely an important piece of that. And the more snow is often the better. Although right now the more snow isn't definitely proportionate to the amount of quality skiing you're going to get in.
And then you get the pointers to the specific aspects of the weather forecast, which is a cut from more detail that you can find on the Meteo France forecast, but it's actually the critical things you need to know. Where's the wind? What direction is it coming from? Because that will affect the slabs the following day. Where's the freezing level? And for those of us who like our sunshine, will it be sunny or not?
Yeah, and freezing level, by the way, is the isotherm, for those of you who didn't know that. And also, once a week, every Wednesday, usually before 8 or 9 o'clock at night French time, we publish an English translation of this and other not only the quality of the snow here, but also the snowpack stability on Henry's Avalanche Talk blog.
So thank you very much for your time on that one, Henry. If there's any questions, this will be the last chance or any comments. This will be the last chance for us to pick them up. But this now will be planning to close this broadcast fairly shortly. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Henry?
No, I just think thank everyone of you for taking a few minutes out, listening to what we have to say. And if you didn't feel like you wanted to ask a question now, or you think of something later, you can always send us an email. See, there's several dozen people out there tonight checking in with us on a Friday night. That's a fairly good number, I think, especially during this holiday period. I'll just summarize and say, we have challenging conditions, but you can also see that it's also beautiful, and look forward to seeing you out here in the Alps in one place or another soon.
Another place, if you want to make any comments or anything, is to add any comments or things, and we'll pick those up. I'm just checking to see whether there's any more comments there now, right, Henry?
Okay.
No, please feel free to ask anything there, because then we can share it and other people can see it. So
sure.
Thanks very much, everyone, and thank you, Henry.
Thank you. Have fun. Be safe.